Now, how this small tribal village has now become the talk amongst people who value human rights and social justice, cutting across geographical and even political barriers, is a very, very, very important point to note and to discuss. Atrocities were committed by the uniformed officials in the village, the forest officials, police officials, and the revenue department officials. It was a planned operation by the forest officials to unearth the so-called sandalwood, which is buried in the riverbed and other places in the villages. It is a known fact, known to the government, known to people in the hierarchy, higher-ups, and the higher officials of these departments, that smuggling was in sandalwood was carried on by the politicians and the forest officials with the connivance of the police. Made the entire village assemble at there's a peepal tree there, and they made him sit. They made all of them sit there, and as captive. And that's where the violent incidents of molestation and rape was committed by these men on the women. And I am not going into the description of it. That's an entirely different story, an emotionally charged and a heartbreaking story. We cannot imagine such things happening to women. And if you read the depositions, you will know the travails that they went through and the scars with which they have lived. They're still living with all those incidents which have really, I don't know, I don't think we can even imagine such things happening to any one of us. And the women who were raped, all of them were in Salem jail, and some of them had been very unwell, felt sick, and one of them was even pregnant, and she delivered a child in the jail of the Madras High Court, Justice Padmini Jesundare. The petition which was given on 30th July was rejected on 17th of August, saying that they did not propose action. They did not propose action because they did not believe that uniformed officials could act in that manner. Madras High Court was to punish the offenders and to initiate departmental action against them, to compensate the victims and to rehabilitate the villagers, and to inquire into the nexus between politicians, forest officials, and the police. The bureaucracy also can be brought to our assistance in the case of ordinary people was something which was proved in this particular case. And it doesn't normally happen. It should normally happen. It doesn't normally happen, but it does at times. And that's what really helped these victims, these survivors, to get justice at some point in time. And also, a police complaint was given by the 18 rape survivors to the local police station, that is the Harur police station, on 22nd August 1992. Now, this police complaint has not been acted upon by any of the successive governments that had ruled the state until today. This is one point that we should really note with anguish. Now, 269 officials of the state government were charge-sheeted for this case for having committed various offences against the tribal villagers of Vachathi. I was quite surprised when the opponents who had filed the appeals for the accused, they were the first ones to call and congratulate us on their loss. They're saying that the appeal has been dismissed and the conviction has been upheld. They said the case is different and we feel differently and we are with the victims. So we do understand that humanism is not dead. A junior colleague of mine who is practicing in the Supreme Court told me that, ma'am, some people came to me for filing an appeal, and the rape offenders came. I turned it down. I could not do it. So such is the hope among the lawyer community and among all right-thinking sections of the people, that today in the country there is a need to join hands and to protect the minorities, because marginalized and the Adivasis and the scheduled tribes, because there is a state perpetrated violence in the guise of, in various disguises. We saw what is happening in Manipur. It was burning, but the Prime Minister was mum for almost 3 months. He did not open his mouth.
Good evening and good morning, everyone. Welcome to another session by Ambedkar King Study Circle. This is the second talk about the Vachathi state atrocity. The landmark judgment that recently came out after more than 3 decades of fight has triggered our consciousness. This is the first judgment where every uniformed personnel accused was found guilty. In the first talk, Comrade G.Chamki shared the experience of the journey on the ground. In continuation with that, our guest today, Advocate Chamki Raj, is going to talk about the legal journey of fighting the state machinery. Comrade Chamki Raj started her career in 1987. She went to Vachathi in 1992 as a member of All India Lawyers Union and also a correspondent of Frontline magazine. Then the struggle became the part of life. Comrade Nallasivam of CPM being the petitioner in this case, a team of lawyers fought for justice with the people. Advocate Chamki Raj with Advocate Ilango is the counsel on record in the High Court and Supreme Court. She was a member of All India Lawyers Union then and now the Vice President. Our understanding of justice as common person is varied. We often think morality and legality are same, or at least similar, but it is hardly so. Most of the times, especially for those who face state oppression, the legal process comes as a surprise because it is a whole different system and procedure that our everyday life is not a part of. The entire credit of fighting for justice goes to the people of Vachathi. They had the determination to stand up for themselves, fight tirelessly, ask for help, and be brave to not give in to the stigma. The village was rampaged in 1992. 18 women were sexually assaulted, including minor girls as young as 13 years old. The girl who was studying 8th standard then could not continue to study. She is a 43-year-old woman now. Can we imagine how much of life is lost to attain the milestone judgment? The journey still continues in the Supreme Court after everyone had claimed a piece of victory. While the CPM party, the Tribal Association, the Lawyers Union, IDWA, and many more democratic organizations and unions continue to fight the same fight now in the Supreme Court. When I asked Comrade Chamki Raj for her profile for this intro, she gave me 2 lines. I'm an advocate. I'm part of All India Lawyers Union. That's all. Then I Googled her name. The first page was filled with public interest litigations and writs filed by her with the power, where the power perpetuates the people, from Vachathi to Pollachi. That speaks way more than what I have to say here. I'm glad to welcome Advocate Comrade Chamki Raj on behalf of Ambedkar King Study Circle to share her experiences in the legal journey with the people of Vachathi. Welcome, Comrade. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Arulmozhi, and good evening to all of you, and good morning to my friends, some of the friends from India. Thank you for the introduction as well. It's been great communicating with you, though we haven't met, but it really brought me to mind Che Guevara's words that if you tremble with indignation at every injustice, then you are a comrade of mine. I think that is what brings all of us together. And I'm happy to share my experiences as part of the team that worked for the people of Vachathi along with other organizations. Now, At the risk of repeating myself, I would just like to give a small introduction about the incident itself and about the village. See, Vachathi village is at the foothills of the Chiteri Hills in Dharmaburi district. It's about 17 kilometers away from Harur, which is the Taluk headquarters. In 1992, the total population of the village was about 655, out of which 643, except 12, where they belong to Malayali tribe. The tribe is called Malayali because they live in the hills. There were about 200 houses, out of which about 120 were built under the group housing scheme. And out of this entire population, only about 190, that is including families, 190 persons, if I may say that, they owned land. The rest of them, they did not have any land holdings, and the main activity was agriculture. And also they used to collect minor forest products, firewood from the forest, etc. And they also were working as agricultural laborers in the nearby village. I'm giving you this background only to show the way during the course of the legal journey, as you have termed it, the allegations against the villagers was that they were smugglers of sandalwood in that area. And I had briefly given you the economic background of the people of Vachathi, and I leave it to your imagination whether they were smugglers of sandalwood or otherwise. Now, how this small tribal village has now become the talk amongst people who value human rights and social justice, cutting across geographical and even political barriers, is a very, very, very important point to note and to discuss. Now, to recall the violent incidents to which the tribals were subjected to in 1992, I think in your introduction you gave a fairly significant account of whatever atrocities were committed by the uniformed officials in the village, the forest officials, police officials, and the revenue department officials. It was a planned operation by the forest officials to unearth the so-called sandalwood, which is buried in the riverbed and other places in the villages. These forests are rich in sandalwood, and it is a known fact, known to the government, known to people in the hierarchy, higher-ups, and the higher officials of these departments, that smuggling in sandalwood was carried on by the politicians and the forest officials with the connivance of the police. Now, the role of the villagers in this was, they may not even be aware that they were part of smuggling this sandalwood, because they were used for felling of the trees, to cut the sandalwood, to load the logs and unload the logs at different places as directed by the forest officials. They were doing it only because they had to make a living. That is why they were doing this job. But when this was going on, what triggered the incident is the most important thing. A few weeks before the incident took place, the villagers caught a person who was smuggling sandalwood and handed him over to the police. This was something which had never happened before. Of course, it had happened a couple of times, but I think that at that particular point in time, they caught him red-handed and also gave a complaint to the police. This kind of alerted the forest officials, and they did not want any such things to go on, and they wanted to teach a lesson to the people of Vachathi, that their role is not to question and not to find people who were smuggling sandalwood, and their role was to just obey their orders and do whatever they wanted the villagers to do. So in the name of raiding, in the name of a combing operation, to unearth the sandalwood. See, normally what they would do is they'll make use of the villagers, as I told you earlier, that they'll cut down the logs and bury them under the riverbed or in some places identifiable by the forest officials, and then take them out as and when they want and transport it to other places, to the wherever it has to go, through the smugglers and to the smugglers. Now, a raid was planned to unearth. The reason given by them was to unearth the sandalwood, which was smuggled by the people and was hidden under the in their fields and other places, which were buried there. So on 20th June 1992, they descended on the village. And while they were trying to unearth sandalwood and figure out where it was buried, they came across in a field a person, I think his name was Perumal. He was working in the field. He was a tribal. And these forest officials, about 45 in number, in small group, a raid party, they asked him to own up that particular log of sandalwood that they found, and said that you should say that this you had tried to bury it and tried to smuggle it away from the forest. The man refused because he was innocent. He refused. So a forester beat him up, and then obviously the villagers joined together and there was a scuffle. And in the scuffle, what happened was the forester was injured. And that provoked the forest officials. But what happened was actually the scuffle was prevented by the women of the village, and the forester was also given first aid by the people themselves, and he was sent to the hospital at Harur for treatment. Now, as I told you before, the operation was a planned one. In fact, the forest officials had also requested the police and revenue officials to be present at Vachathi village when they were trying to apprehend these villagers in the name of unearthing the sandalwood which was smuggled by them. So there was a delay in the police party arriving, and therefore this happened even before they could arrive. But soon after this forester was injured, while he was on his way to the hospital, the others who were trying to come in a large contingent, that is the police officials and the revenue officials and also forest officials, they saw that the forester was injured and some of them were going to the hospital. So they were enraged by this. How could it happen to armed personnel and uniformed officials, and that too by a retaliation by ordinary people, that too tribals, and who were actually acting at their command and their whims and fancies. So they just descended on the village and made the entire village assemble at there's a people tree there, and they made all of them sit there and as captive. And some of the officials who came there, they raided every house, each and every house. As mentioned at the introduction, I had happened to be there about a month later after the incident, and I did not find a single house which was not damaged, and a single object in the house which was not damaged. The grains were strewn around, the certificates were torn and thrown around, and every single thing in the house and every household was damaged, completely damaged, making it unfit for living. And also what happened during this assembling of the villagers was, this happened around afternoon, around 3:30, when they were all brought to that people tree. And the forest officials picked out some boys, able-bodied boys, young boys, about five or 8, and picked out around 18 to 20 women who were young and took them to the riverbed, saying that you have to unearth the sandalwood which is buried there by you people. And that's where the violent incidents of molestation and rape was committed by these men on the women. And I am not going into the description of it. That's an entirely different story, an emotionally charged and a heartbreaking story. We cannot imagine such things happening to women. And if you read the depositions, you will know the travails that they went through and the scars with which they have lived. They're still living with all those incidents, which have really, I don't know, I don't think we can even imagine such things happening to any one of us. And I stopped there where the women are concerned, because I don't want to get into that, because the entire thing would be something else. It will be directed towards something else. So these people completely destroyed the houses, and also they went on a rampage. They looted whatever little money or gold ornaments or food grains that they had, and they took away the poultry. And they also made these women, they were there for 3 days, 20th, 21st, and 22nd of June. And they made these women cook and eat. On the first day, on the 20th, they took 90 women and 28 children, along with the sandalwood logs, which they said they had confiscated from these villages. And they took them to the forest range office at Harur. And in the night on the 20th, at the forest range office, you may wonder whether the police force and had women officials or women police officials or not. They did accompany them. There were women. Even when the women were taken to the riverbed to unearth the sandalwood, the women constables were asked to keep off. They have said it in their deposition that we were not allowed to go there. And even in the night when the women were detained in the Harur Forest Range office, the women constables were sent away. They were asked to go away and then come back and report the next morning. And what happened during the night with some men, about 15 men were also there, and they were sexually harassed, both men and women of Vachathi village. And they were also booked under forest offences of smuggling sandalwood and were taken to Salem Central Jail. But around the same time, on the 20th, the Assistant Conservator of Forest had given a false complaint to the police against 105 villagers, which included most of them women, about 96 were women. And this case, they said that the villagers did not allow them to perform their duties, and they tried to attack them with criminal intention, and that they would try to kill them and all that. But these incidents, which happened around the end of June, did not come to light until these men and men who were imprisoned in Salem jail tried to seek bail. So that when one or two of them were coming out on bail, others came to know about such incidents in the village. And the women who were raped, all of them were in Salem jail. And some of them had been very unwell, felt sick, and one of them was even pregnant, and she delivered a child in the jail. And the child was named Jail Rani, if I remember right. And when these women complained to the warder, she was a witness who deposed later during the trial. She told, these women, some of them had confided in her and told her that this had happened. And a doctor was also there in the prison who had examined these women and gave them some kind of medication and for their bruises and other things. So these incidents, when they were trying to seek bail, as I told you, people were coming to know of it. And the Tamilnadu Tribals Association came to hear of this, and they tried to meet these people. The Tribals Association, the president was Mr. Bashajan, Comrade Bashajan, and the secretary at that point in time was Comrade Shanmugam, and the ex-MLA of Harur who belonged to CPIM. The sitting MLA at that time belonged to the ruling party then, and who was part of this smuggling gang. There was he was one of those who was smuggler in that area. And so the people did not trust him. They went to the ex-MLA who belonged to the CPIM, and they together tried to gather information. And they also informed the CPIM party and the All India Democratic Women's Association and the Tribals Association. And all of them had gone there as a team. And they met the villagers, the CPIM team headed by Comrade Nallasivan, and the IDWA team with Comrade Maithili Sivaraman and Papa Manath. And the All India Lawyers Union team, I had a couple of us had gone there, Mr. Ravi and I, and they had all met people. But the point is that all this happened sometime in July 1992, when all of them were not out on bail, and the villagers did not resume habitation in the village because their houses were destroyed. So the information collected by these teams were from people whom they could actually meet. There were many who were in the hiding and who had gone away to their relatives' places, and women were outside, and they were scared to come back and live in their own village. That was the plight of these villagers. You can imagine, like, under fear of threat, and if you can't go live in your place with your family, and you have to, and afraid of an attack by forest and police officials at any point in time, they were petrified. And it was to the credit of the CPIM and the Tamilnadu Tribals Association and the IDWA, which gave them the support at that point in time, and made the villagers come out of the information so that they can help them. And it was also true that the villagers trusted these people and sought their help as well. So all these visits were sometime in July, between 14th and 30th of July. And the reports were submitted and published by these groups, as I told you before. On 30th, now I'll come to the legal journey, which started. Of course, the representations were given by the villagers to the local RDO, collector. Nothing happened. This was given even as early as 17th of July by the local Tamil Nadu Tribal Association member of Harur Taluk, but no action was taken. The collector had come to know of the incident, but as he had himself told the CBI later, but no action was taken by him. Nobody had visited the village. It was on 30th of July that Tamil Nadu Tribals Association gave a representation to the Public Interest Litigation Cell in the Madras High Court. At that point, the public interest litigation petitions were not filed directly by the petitioners. It had to be vetted and screened through a cell, and that cell was headed by the first woman judge of Madras High Court, who also was a first public prosecutor of the Madras High Court, woman public prosecutor of the Madras High Court, Justice Padmini J. Sudre. The petition, which was given on 30th July, was rejected on 17th of August, saying that they did not propose action. They did not propose action because they did not believe that uniformed officials could act in that manner. That was the reason why they turned down any action on the petition. So at that time, what happened was that, as Comrade Nallasivan also had been there, he was the state secretary of the CPIM and also a member of the Rajya Sabha at that point in time. And my seniors, Ms. Vaige and Mr. NJR Prasad, who had given a suggestion that this had to be filed as directly as a writ petition in the Supreme Court, which happens in very rare cases. Normally, we file writ petitions when the rights are violated against a government before the High Court's having jurisdiction. But this was a situation where the High Court had rejected the tribal association's representation to be treated as a public interest litigation. So therefore, it was filed under Article 32 of the Constitution of India as a writ petition before the Supreme Court directly. Now, in the Supreme Court, the founder, General Secretary of the All India Lawyers Union, Comrade Hardev Singh, he was only too willing to do it to help the hapless tribal villagers of Vachathi in Tamilnadu, of whom he had little or no knowledge about. All that he wanted to do was to establish their rights and seek justice for them. So I had been there to file this writ petition in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, when it came up for hearing, the judges had already read the papers. They asked the solicitor who was representing Tamil Nadu government, they said, how come this has come to our court? It involves a large number of tribals, and investigation is sought for, and that can be done and possibly done only in the respective state, in the state of Tamil Nadu. So therefore, for logistics reasons, it's very important that the case is heard by the Madras High Court. So they transferred the writ petition to Madras High Court. Normally what happens is, they would say, we'll dispose of the writ petition, giving you the liberty to file it before the appropriate court. That was not the case in Vachathi. That was not so in this case. They transferred it and also directed the Madras High Court to hear it at the earliest. So this was the first step forward in the case. And the case was transferred with appropriate modifications. We filed it in the Madras High Court. And the relief that we had sought for before the Madras High Court was to punish the offenders and to initiate departmental action against them, to compensate the victims and to rehabilitate the villagers, and to inquire into the nexus between politicians, forest officials, and the police, and to suggest measures to protect the rich sandalwood reserves in the Chiteri Hills for common good. So this was our prayer. Now, I must say that with the reports that were given by the All India Democratic Women's Association after visiting the place, Comrade Maithili Sivaraman had forwarded it to the Commissioner of Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes stationed in Chennai. The commission is headed by the Commissioner at Delhi, but they do have directors at every state headquarters. It was headed by an IAS officer, Srimati Bhamati. And Comrade Maithili Sivaraman, having given the representation on behalf of AIDBA, had requested Mrs. Bhamati to visit the place and see it for herself. This representation, even as seen in the report given by the SCST Commissioner, Mrs. Bhamati, says that she received the application on 3rd August 1992. And she visited the place on 6th, 7th and 8th August 1992. Before she visited the place, Comrade Maithili took me to her place and also gave details of the offences committed against women. That was a good experience for me because the bureaucracy also can be brought to our assistance in the case of ordinary people was something which was proved in this particular case. And it doesn't normally happen. It should normally happen. It doesn't normally happen, but it does at times. And that's what really helped these victims, these survivors, to get justice at some point in time. Mrs. Bhamati, who had visited the village, had conducted an investigation along with her officials and gave a report to the SCST Commission at Delhi, in which she had said, she had listed out various things, the background and how it happened and all those incidents. I'm not going into details of it, but she had also said that there is an allegation of rape by the women of Vachathi, and these allegations should be gone into and investigated upon. This was one sentence that really helped us through the case at the beginning, because this case we have to face it differently. Even to go in for an investigation, even to get the investigation going, we had to struggle. So this was at the initial stage that this report came in handy, and it helped us a lot. So we filed this petition and relied upon certain documents. And the documents were, one, the report by the CPIM, then the report by the IDBA, and the report by Tamilnadu Tribals Association, and Mrs. Bhamathi's report. Now, we also had filed the representations given by the villagers to seeking investigation into the issue, the atrocities that were committed on them by the uniformed officials. And also a police complaint was given by the 18 rape survivors to the local police station, that is the Harur police station, on 22nd August 1992. Now, this police complaint has not been acted upon by any of the successive governments that had ruled the state until today. This is one point that we should really note with anguish. So these were the documents that we relied upon. And in the writ petition, we had sought for interim relief because they had no drinking water, there was no transport facility to the village, and also the children could not go to school. They did not get their rations because everything was destroyed. So the High Court ordered restoration of basic amenities as a first interim measure. But even that was not carried out in time, and it was sluggish. Therefore, we requested the court to appoint Mrs. Bhamathi again to place an action taken report on the order, interim order passed by the Madras High Court. And she filed a report after observing whatever has been restored and what has not been restored. But she also stated that villagers are still living in fear of the uniformed personnel, and something has to be done to instill confidence in them, and they have to be suitably compensated. Now, when the case was pending before the Madras High Court, the counter statements filed by the respondents here are the Secretary to the Department of Forests, and similar persons of the Home Department, Revenue Department, the District Collector of Dharmaburi, and the Superintendent of Police of Dharmaburi. All of them in one voice denied any such incident had taken place. So we could not progress. They were taking their own time to file their counter statements, and they had all of them had said that no such incident had happened. That's where the report given by the SC Commissioner came to our rescue, where we pointed out whatever had happened as observed by her. Now, this was instrumental in the court ordering investigation by the CBI. That was ordered almost 3 years after the incident. The order was dated 24th of February 1995. The incident was in June 1992. So to get the investigation ordered, it took almost more than 2.5 years. But soon after CBI investigation was ordered, the state government went on appeal to the division bench of the Madras High Court, which was saying that they said, we will conduct the investigation. Why do you want to hand it over to the CBI? But the judges, the Chief Justice bench, rightly rejected their argument, saying, you had not conducted any inquiry till now, and you had all denied all these incidents, and how do we expect you to accept your words and say that you will conduct the investigation? We are not inclined. And they dismissed the appeal. Then they went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court also dismissed their appeal, and therefore CBI had taken over the case for investigation, and they registered their FIR on 23/3/1995. And the complainant was Comrade Nallasivan, and the investigation was carried out. Now, the investigation report and the report to the court was filed sometime in the year 1996, because they had to identify the offenders, the criminals, the accused. The accused were, as you all know, that they are forest and police officials. They have to identify, which means they had to conduct identification parade. The test identification parade conducted, it's usually conducted as, say, there were about 300 officials involved. So about 1,500 officials were involved to identify the accused. So it's usually in the ratio of 1:5 or 1:6. And they would all be standing, and these women had to go and identify the offenders after 3 years. And even during this period of 3 years, there was so much of compulsion, and they were threatened. The villagers were threatened and were asked to withdraw their complaint and asked to give up their pursuit for justice in various ways, but they did not relent. And the women were able to identify the offenders even during the test identification parade. You can imagine under what circumstances they would have done it. And there's one incident which is sufficient for you to understand how terrible or how horrific this whole process should have been for the villagers, because the magistrate who had to conduct the test identification parade sought protection, and he sent a letter to the Madras High Court, registrar of the Madras High Court, seeking protection, saying that I'm being threatened by the officials. I am not able to conduct the test identification parade, and the court had to pass orders to give him protection. So that was the plight of the magistrate who was conducting the test identification parade. So you can imagine the plight of the villagers. So then the CBI succeeded, and the women succeeded in identifying persons. And the report of the CBI said, I'm just quoting the report of the CBI, investigation has established the allegations of rape, molestation, assault, illegal detention, destruction of property, falsification of records, furnishing false information, and screening of offenders by the officials. This is what the report said. The report also said that 18 girls were molested and raped, and 80 women and 15 men and 16 children were taken to the Harur Forest Range office on 20th of June and illegally detained at night, and they were humiliated. And scheduled timber offenses, this is under the Forest Act. These cases were fabricated against. I'm reading from the report of the CBI investigation report. Said STOR cases, the scheduled timber offenses cases, were fabricated against the villagers, against men and women numbering more than 100 and men about 15. In all these 3 cases, documents were fabricated, thumb and palm impressions of villagers were obtained under coercion. Then the report also said that on a complaint from the Assistant Conservator of Forest, Harur police registered an FIR against the villagers. The investigation has shown that the Inspector of Police did not conduct the investigation, and all the accused in the forest cases were remanded in the police case, and a charge sheet was filed against 76 women, 15 men, and 14 named men. That is a total of 105 people. So this was the report given by the CBI, and the charge sheet was filed a year after it took over. That is on the 23rd of April 1996. Arulmozhi, please tell me if I have to stop and if I'm exceeding my time, please. The charge sheet had named 269 accused. Accused 1 to 155 were forest officials, and accused number 156 to 263, that is 108 police officials and 6 revenue officials, accused numbers 264 to 269. Now, 269 officials of the state government were charge sheeted for this case for having committed various offences against the tribal villagers of Vachathi. And the report, the investigation report very clearly detailed the way the offences were committed on the villagers. After 1996, it was for the trial court, the sessions court in Dharmaburi to take over. But the trial was delayed. First of all, there was no sufficient space in the court to accommodate 269 officials. So the case was conducted in the Krishnagiri Sessions Court, which was slightly larger. For some time, it was conducted in Krishnagiri, and thereafter, it was once the space was made ready, the construction was ready, it was shifted to Harur. And you know that the after about 19 years, on 29th September 2011, the trial court convicted all the 269 officials, saying they are guilty, and imposed punishments on them under various offences of Indian Penal Code and under the Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. In the meanwhile, during this period, when the trial was on in the Sessions Court, we filed various cases in the Madras High Court. As I told you earlier, even for conducting the dress identification parade, we had to file a petition. And also the rules under the Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act was dated 1989. But the rules under the Act were notified in the year 1995 only. And the rules prescribed certain compensation for the victims who were subjected to violence at various stages. When the FIR is filed, when the charge sheet is filed, and when the trial is completed, it prescribes certain compensation for the victims who are scheduled castes or scheduled tribes. And since these rules were notified only in 1995, and the case was already handed over to the CBI at that point in time, we filed a review application seeking compensation to be paid to the victims. But one of the finest judges, Justice Abdul Hadi, who had ordered CBI investigation, told us that he will not entertain it because it is a statutory compensation and we can always give a representation to the state, and state is duty bound to compensate the victims under the statute, and therefore you can proceed on those lines. And since the CBI is now seized off the matter, I do not want to delay investigation or the progress in the case, not the investigation, the trial. I do not want to cause any further delay on this score, and therefore I'm not entertaining. You go ahead with representing to the state. So we filed another writ petition seeking compensation. Then we had to file a petition to seek appointment of a special public prosecutor of the CBI to conduct the case. The role of the CBI public prosecutor, Mr. Jayabalan, and the investigation officer, Mr. Jagannathan of the CBI, and the SC Commissioner, Bhamati, their roles, I think they are very vital because they have helped these victims from the side of the bureaucracy to secure justice. Because the trial, at the trial stage, the conviction of 269 officials is not an easy thing to happen. There were 75 witnesses in the case, and there were 324 documents that were marked. Now, the the strength of a criminal case depends upon the statement given by the victims and witnesses, and also the documents and the deposition of the witnesses and the investigation report. All these things should corroborate. Whatever the investigation report contains should be corroborated as evidence by the witnesses. Because if you ask any lawyer who is practicing on the criminal side, they would say as a defense lawyer for the accused, they would only look for the lacuna wherever there is a gap between the statements and the report. Now, you can imagine in a case of this magnitude with 75 witnesses and so many documents, the investigation officer's report, all these coincided and corroborated the incidents that really happened, which means nobody had anything to fabricate or falsify. It was the truth, and the villagers spoke the truth. Even people who are educated, who are able to speak up for themselves, they kind of crumble in cross-examination in any court, also any civil court or criminal court, so much more in a criminal offense if they're involved. But that did not happen when the deposition was given by the villagers, when they were cross-examined by the defense lawyers. There were a galaxy of defense lawyers because the accused were of highest officials of the forest and police department. The IFS officers, IPS officers were involved, and they could bring anybody to defend them before any court in India. But the villagers, their testimony and the report corroborated, and all of them were held guilty. Now, they filed appeals before the Madras High Court, and we intervened and opposed the bail to be granted, opposed the bail that they sought for the accused, the punished, the convicts. Now, I must say one thing in here. None of the officials who had committed the crime were arrested at any point in time since the incident took place in 1992, despite complaint against them, which was not acted upon, despite the CBI report and the charge sheet filed against them. Nobody was arrested. It was for the first time the 17 rape offenders were detained in prison on 29/9/2011, when the Sessions Court convicted that all 269 had committed the offence, and they convicted them. Only the rape offenders were taken to the prison, the 17 of them who were guilty of rape. The rest of them walked out of the court. Until today, nobody has been arrested. Now, the cases that were slapped against the villagers, we had filed in 1999 when the charge sheet was filed. We had filed an application, filed a petition under Article 4, under Section 482 of the Criminal Procedure Code to quash the charge sheet against the 105 villages, in which 96 were women. And despite all the evidence that we could place, which was contained in the report of the SCST Commissioner and the CBI, that these cases were false and fabricated against the villagers. It took 20 long years for the High Court to quash that order, and the order came on 15/11/2012, 20 years after the incident. Now, as I told you earlier, it was on the strength of the report, on the strength of the CBI, reports of the CBI and the CST Commissioner and the deposition of the victims, that we were able to secure these kind of orders. I won't say victory. The victory is of the people of Vachathi, who stood firm in their pursuit for justice, and supported by the organizations which I had mentioned earlier. Now, one thing we need to understand, the provisions of the SCST, we have, the Constitution makes special provisions for enactments to protect the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes minorities in our country. And that is how the Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act was promulgated in the year 1989. Despite the act, and despite the evidence, and despite the reports by the bureaucrats themselves, it has taken 19 years for the trial court to convict the offenders. It had taken 20 years for the courts to quash the false cases against the villagers. One cannot resist from drawing a parallel to the other cases involving high-profile offenders, how the courts act in few hours and few minutes and come to their rescue. But it did not happen in the case of the hapless tribals of Vachathi village. I would say, even in a case where, in the Nirbhaya case, which is a stark example of how a government, if it really wants to act, can come to the rescue of the survivors or the victims and do something, because the state machinery is with them. You may recall that in 2012, December, the incident shook the conscience of the people of the country in India. And in the Nirbhaya case, a commission was appointed, headed by the retired Chief Justice of India, and a report was submitted with regard to punishment of the offenders. And within 3 months, the commission gave a report and the criminal law was amended. Criminal Law Amendment Act was brought about. But here, in the case of the tribals, there was an act which said all these are offenses under the act. There is a statute. There was a statute which was there from 1989, and the incident took place only in 1992. But still, the courts did not do anything. Courts were not proactive. We must understand, as I think at the introduction, Arulmozhi pointed out, that morality is different and justice is different. It is different. And we look up on the judiciary thinking that we are all equal before the eye of law. It is not so. It is definitely not so. The courts and the law do not come to the rescue of the ordinary people. They function as instrumentalities of the state. That is the stark reality. And only if you understand that stark reality, we can build up a movement to protect the rights of the minorities and the hapless people, and to establish social justice, because that is something that we need to understand. And it is not a hopeless situation. It's no doubt that Vachathi case has given a kind of an impetus to the democratic movement in the country, that we are discussing it today, cutting across continents, countries, and barriers. As I said earlier, even political barriers. People were compelled to welcome this judgment when the High Court upheld the conviction. But the legal journey doesn't end here. There is yet another course that we have to go through, and they have filed appeals in the Supreme Court. The accused, number one, the principal chief conservator of forest, he has been granted bail. He was not present at the place of the occurrence, but he had manipulated records. I believe, as I see it, the courts consider it a lesser offense of shielding the offenders. He has been let on bail, but the others have been directed to surrender. The others also will be now filing the special leave petition. When lawyers, as part of this struggle, assisting the victims, along with the political party that had done so and the women's organization, I would say that lawyers do defend these people, but there is still hope in building a democratic movement of lawyers to come to the rescue of these people. Not everything is hopeless. I was quite surprised when the opponents who had filed the appeals for the accused, they were the first ones to call and congratulate us on their loss. They're saying that the appeal has been dismissed and the conviction has been upheld. They said the case is different, and we feel differently, and we are with the victims. So we do understand that humanism is not dead. there is another example for this. Just 2 days ago, a junior colleague of mine who's practicing in the Supreme Court told me that, ma'am, some people came to me for filing an appeal, and the rape offenders came. I turned it down. I could not do it. So such is the hope among the lawyer community and among all right-thinking sections of the people. I'm really happy that people like you who are working in the IT industry and other lawyers and other people have been standing firmly with these victims. And we must also consider that today in the country, there is a need to join hands and to protect the minorities, because marginalized and the Adivasis and the scheduled tribes, because there is a state perpetrated violence in the guise of, in various disguises. We saw what is happening in Manipur. It was burning, but the Prime Minister was mum for almost 3 months. He did not open his mouth. That is the situation prevailing in the country. So as people who stand for social justice and to protect human rights, it is our duty and responsibility to share our experiences in incidents like Vachathi and other cases, and to stand together to build up a strong movement globally with the help of each other, and to protect the rights of people within our own system, and to stand for human rights. With this, I conclude. Thank you very much for the opportunity.